Welcome to Sound of Resistance channel. Zelensky army smashed Ukraine into the Russian army. The attack of the Ukrainian warriors to the lands occupied by the Russian army continues throughout the country. The Russian army no longer has the strength to stand in Ukraine. Many Russian soldiers are fleeing, leaving their posts on the front. The Ukrainians began to reap the rewards of their determination and perseverance, which they had shown since the beginning of the war. More and more Ukrainian flags are flying across Ukraine. Thanks to Zelensky's successful war strategy, and lands occupied by the Russian army were taken back in a short time. Violent attacks by the Ukrainian army in the south of the country yielded results. The Russian army could no longer resist the attacks of the Ukrainian troops and decided to withdraw. The Ukrainian army achieved a very important victory with the Kherson victory. Kherson was a strategically important city on a logistic route. Another reason that makes Kherson attractive is that it is a getaway to Crimea. President of Ukraine Zelensky is looking forward to taking Crimea, which has been in the hand of Russia since 2014. The important gain in Kherson gave Ukraine a new hope for Crimea. With the approach of the Ukrainian army to Crimea, Russian leader Putin became extremely uneasy. Russian leader Putin directed a battalion of Russian soldiers to Crimea against possible attacks of Ukrainian soldiers in Crimea. Russia's losses in Ukraine caused it to draw all the attention. The withdrawal of the Russian army from Kherson was the last development with patience. Russian President Putin is accused of bowing Russia's head after the withdrawal. The withdrawal of the Russian army from Kherson caused a great reaction in the Kremlin. The Kremlin ally turned against Russian President Putin, causing increased pressure that Putin should not hand over the seat. Russia's unsuccessful results in Ukraine played into the hands of opponents of Putin in the Kremlin. Opponents even launched a petition for the resignation of Russian leader Putin. It was revealed that Putin's allies and FSB officers were opposing the Ukraine war in leaked emails. Chaos, civil war, collapse. Yes, it is all ahead of us. It is inevitable, said the FSB agent. Many people in Russia have stated that they have passed the point of no return. And information from Russia's Federal Security Service has leaked emails that indicate a civil war has broken out between President Vladimir Putin's closest allies. Allies of Russia's authoritarian leader have voiced criticism and opposition to Putin's invasion of Ukraine as Russian troops withdraw and the military operation stalled this week. The divergence of opinion among Russia's FSB officers was highlighted by the Russian agent called the wind of change. The sharing of resources will lead to wars between regions, or there will be a clash of various forces for control over regions or parts of the country, said the agent from the Russian Federal Security Service. The Russian agent warned that Russia could be plugged into complete chaos. In this regular letter to exiled Russian dissident Vladimir Osechkin, the FSB agent revealed growing anger and opposition among FSB officials. Allies are rising up against Putin's war in neighboring Ukraine. Russian human rights activist Osechkin is making great efforts to fight corruption. FSB officers confirmed that authenticity of the leaked emails by FSB expert Christo Grozev. He said at least two FSB officials who said the November emails were authentic had no doubt that it was written by a colleague. FSB expert Christo Grozev said, "Believe me, this is much more terrible. I urge, and this is by no means the private opinion of a simple employee. We destroyed the country. We destroyed the country. Chaos, civil war, collapse, yes, it is all ahead of us. It is inevitable," said the FSB agent. Too many people in Russia have crossed the point of no return. They plan to be petty tsars in the areas that the Russian authorities have succeeded in seizing in Ukraine. At least that's what they think, said the FSB agent. The FSB representative explained that the contents of the emails were quite dangerous, and there was an inevitable civil war within the agency by the officers. He warned that Russia would soon fall into the abyss of terror and added that as soon as Russia fails to catch up with the motive, it will get the war fatigue. The emails also focus on the case of PMC Wager beheading his own fighter for desertion. Criticizing Putin's ally and founder of the mercenary Wagner group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, and Chechen leader Ramazan Kadyrov, the duo widely mocked Putin's war, showing rare opposition and citing loopholes in the Kremlin. This came after the US think tank Institute for War Studies suggested in October that Prigozhin and his military group could pose a threat to Putin. The danger in Russia continues not only in domestic affairs, but also in the international arena. Russian President Putin turned his back on the United States. Russia has stated that it has no plans for a Russia-US summit as of now. A summit is out of the question at the moment, Dmitry Peskov said. A spokesperson for the Kremlin said in a statement that a Russia-US summit was unlikely as there was nothing to discuss about Ukraine. There is no summit at the moment, Dmitry Peskov said, according to Sputnik. Peskov's statements came after Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabko's statement suggesting that Russia and the United States could meet. Sergei Ryabko said that the meeting will be about nuclear proliferation and strategic stability, not Ukraine. As for the Ukraine issue, we have nothing to discuss with them there, said Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabko. He closed all the doors to the United States, saying, every time we touched on the Ukraine issue in some way, all this come down to sending mutual signals, but there can be no dialogue or moreover negotiation because our views are at the opposite poles. The conflicts between Russia and Ukraine still continue within the framework of all developments. According to the latest news from the war in Ukraine, it was claimed that close to 10 million people in Ukraine did not have access to electricity due to the latest situation in the war due to Russian attacks. Zelensky said that the Ukrainian government is doing everything it can to normalize the electricity supply. It is snowing in Ukraine right now, which means more problems for Ukrainians as they do not have access to electricity to warm themselves. He said the clashes slowed down because of the snowfall. Michael Kaufman, director of the Russian Studies Research Program, said, Ukraine's next attacks will be more challenging. They will take more time, they will get more ammunition, they will potentially be more costly. In anticipation of the approaching winter, Russia's military commanders ordered Russian troops to take up a defensive position, he said. War analysts touched upon the issue of Russia withdrawing Russian troops from Kherson. Analysts believe that the Russia also pulled out of Kherson in line with this plan to ensure that the troop-land ratio is in Russia's favor. Prior to the Kherson retreat, Russian forces were very dispersed, making them vulnerable to Ukrainian counterattack. Russia's tactical goal is to ensure that it does not lose any more conquered territory this winter. At the same time, Russia is using the slower pace of battlefield conflict to integrate Russian recruits into forces as a result of partial mobilization. There are some reports that Russia is planning to send some of the troops it has withdrawn from Kherson to the Donbas region, the eastern battlefield where Ukraine has been in decline since the Kharkiv offensive, he said. The effects of the war in Ukraine are starting to be felt more and more every day. Russia's loss of power in the war divided the country in two. The Russian people and Russian officials rise up after every bad news from Ukraine. Russia is boiling like a witch's cauldron. It is only a matter of time before a great chaos breaks out in Russia. A spark to ignite the fuse in Russia could cause a great upheaval in Russia. Russian leader Putin remains silent. Putin's next move has been a matter of curiosity. Thank you for watching us.